On my universe generator, refactor some more. We've almost completed it at this point. Um, Let me do this real quick. And this real quick. And then maybe something like this. Like this. Leave this linear. Okay, so basically I've arrived on a standardized methodology for the top level of the universe generator that gives me a near infinite space to generate content into with precision, with neighbor finding. Um, the system we ended up using is basically octree aligned grids. Maybe I can do a quick sketch here. Let's just talk about it from the perspective of a quad tree. So, given a quad tree here, we can define some grid uh, that, let's say our grid is we can define some grid such that its top level area will occupy exactly the same space as some depth in the octree, and such that its neighbor grid of the 3 by 3 neighbor grid. So just to kind of illustrate what we're talking about, we'll subdivide a little bit more. Such that its neighbor grid, 3 by 3 neighbor grid, might will always line up with some level of the octree as well. So for this example, our grid depth here would be, let's see, we've got one split at the quad level, then we've got another split in one cell, and then one more split in each of those cells. So our depth of this layer would be 3, but the grid exists independently of the octree. When we cross these grid thresholds, or first of all, when we load data, we will generate it in the space of each of these grids, and then we will inject the data into the octree at a deeper depth under these grids. And the depth is derived from the scale of the things we're trying to generate. So it'll just automatically figure out the best fit for whatever scale you give it. When you cross the bounds of one of these nodes, it will dump the data out of the slice that you just left, and then procedurally generate the data for the next slice of cells, right? And we have an intentional fade out on our material such that from any point, if the point is one cell size away from the player camera, at that point it will be faded completely out, and it fades in over this distance. Which means that if we are, say, directly on the boundary, we should still have all the data loaded that we're capable of seeing. And as soon as we cross this boundary, new data would load into this cell, but it would be invisible when it's loading because we would be right here, and this is going to pop in before it becomes opaque again. So that's the idea of the octree aligned grid. What we do is we have three of them nested. So we have one at a very shallow depth that covers the entire sector, which is just our largest unit of division for our universe. Then we have a layer under that that's injecting clusters and gas. And then we have a layer under that that's injecting middle tier, middle scaled galaxies. And we have a layer under that that's injecting small scale galaxies. Those all live in separate particle systems, and they all get their own parallax scaling based on how big they're supposed to be. Or actually, I think I'm using unified parallax scaling for this level of objects. But either way, basically, those all are virtual coordinate systems that we scale up using parallax. The other thing we do is so this top level octree is pretty big, but if we travel through enough cells, we can exit the bounds of the octree. At that point, we dump the data out of the octree and we recenter it such that the axis aligned grid the player's in is corner aligned with the origin of the octree. Um, and that means that now when the data goes into this, we're back in the center of the octree. So basically, if you leave the bounds of the octree, it will regenerate the octree where you're at, and that gives you the ability to like continue to have precision on neighbor finding and things like that. Um, the That's kind of the top level idea. What this allows us to do is have a efficient generator pattern that we can have three separate different scales of things that we spawn into it. And instead of needing to load every galaxy in the universe up front, we can just load the subset of what would be visible. So our size of our conceptual space goes up massively. And at the same time, we don't have to render or generate as many particles at the same time as we once did. We do have to update them every frame, but all in all, the spawn time is actually faster for the universe system like this, even though we have infinite like entities in it, basically, than it is for the former method I was doing, where I just generate 2 million galaxies up front, and that's it. That's all you get. Um, the other kind of cool thing about this, what I have right now will basically break eventually, but you have to go like a little like it. I'm pretty sure what I have right now is actually larger than the actual real life universe. If you take the conceptual scaling, the conceptual speed you have to move through it, and the amount of distance you can cover before you escape, I'm pretty sure what we have is actually larger than the real universe. Okay, so let's demo what it looks like. I've also done some work on the gas sprites, which I think look a lot better now than they did. Um, I kind of reduced the obvious like rotating particle facing model and reduced the amount of noise that was affecting them and increased the distance they were visible at, and that did a lot to kind of make the gas density effect more obvious. The other thing here, okay, so let's do this. To illustrate the concept of the different octree aligned grids, I actually have a debug parameter that we can use. So we're going to say our large scale nodes are going to be red tinted. Our mid tier nodes are going to be green tinted. And our closed tier nodes are going to be blue tinted. Or something like that. Actually, let's do synthwave colors. Uh, Hang on. Hold up. Got to get the coloring right here if we're going to be cruising through it, right? This is middle tier will be the light blue, and then close up can be green. I think that makes sense. Or yellow. Okay, so now that we've changed those colors, we can look out and kind of see which particles are which. So we can see the very large particles over there far away. We can see the light blue mid-tier particles. And we're actually in a void right now, so we don't see any um, of the small tier particles. But let's go ahead and travel over to this other cluster over here. So as we approach this cluster, our mid-tier particles are going to begin loading in, so you can see them start to appear. And then once we actually enter the active density zone, should happen soon, we're going to start seeing small tier. Okay, this was a pretty low density area actually, but we can see some of the yellow particles. But you can tell that we're in a low density because our nearby nodes are very sparse. There we go. You can see the nearby particles here. And we'll go over here. And the overall effect is you get 3 different layers of different levels of motion that correspond with the scale that those layers would be operating at, like the scale in the depth of the tree that those layers would be operating at. And we can kind of see the pieces. Like yellow are being generated in the smallest tier, blue are being generated in a larger tier than that, and pink are being generated at the very largest tier. Okay, so that's our 3 octreoline grids. We can reset, 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 save all, and we're back to normal. So the other thing that this can do is neighbor finding for spawn hooks. So when we get close enough, and this is on a timer, so that's why it looks choppy. It's not actually lagging. It's just that the update timer for the spawn hooks is only once every 10th of a second. So we're basically getting 10 frames per second explicitly on the bounding box here. And the size also might be a little too big, but you can see that we detected this particle when we got close to it. Let's find a bigger particle. It works for all layers. So this was a large tier here. And there we're at this one. I need a little bit of work on the scanning. Like I want to scan the different layers for at different distances. Um, so that this can load in from further away than like the smaller ones. But I haven't done that yet. And so basically for all of our tiers now, if you get within a certain range, we can detect that and we could potentially spawn a galaxy there. So let's start traveling. So what this does is before I was only able to represent a single sector like this. And it had a much higher count of galaxies and particle density, and it took a very long time to load and things like that. But now we can basically chain together near infinite amounts of these, not fully infinite, but that means that we can just cruise through space in any direction. We will eventually find some clusters that we can go into, and these clusters will generate mid-tier and close-tier galaxies at different scales, and we can detect these galaxies and spawn them. To get an idea of the scale, let's go a little bit faster. Let's go a little bit faster. And a little bit faster. And a little bit faster. A little bit faster. So we'll fly like this for a little bit. We're going very, 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 very impossibly fast right now. And then we're going to slow down. and it'll rebase the octree here because we traveled really far. That was the hitch. So I think I can optimize the octree rebasing to have that occur entirely on the background thread and not hitch. I just haven't done it yet. Um, so we basically traveled billions of light years in uh, that little jaunt. And if we go over here and find a particle to move towards, hey, we still have precise neighbor tracking and neighbor spawning. So everything is done in camera relative coordinates. So um, that's why we're able to maintain precision here. Is that everything is in the particle system, and for the spawn is always calculated relative to the player. Yep. And there we go. And then also as a part of that idea of like rebasing the octree, we would most likely be rebasing our world origin as well when that happens. I'm not sure entirely if that's going to be the case or not yet, but I suspect that's what it'll end up being. And then the rest of the work I've done is all just on materials. Like I said, I had some breakthroughs with the gas sprite material, and I think it looks a lot better now. I was initially pretty bummed about not being able to use my volumetric array marcher under this paradigm, and it's not impossible, but it's unwieldy because we really don't want more than like two or three of those expensive ray marchers in the scene at any given time. Um, we're already going to have one for the atmosphere of planets, so we know that's possible. We're already going to have one for the star system level density field, and we're already going to have one for the galaxy density field. That's three already. If we were to naively do it for this layer, we would need 27 more, all doing their own ray march, all holding a 4K texture. It's just not super easy to get around that. We would either have to reduce the fidelity of the volumetric texture we generate by a lot, or we would have to emplace everything into like a texture array and refactor the ray marcher to like know which part of the texture grid it's in, which would still require us to reduce the fidelity a lot. Whereas doing the gas with like these kind of particle sprites, it's cheap, it's efficient, it's easy to do at a high speed while we're running, and it doesn't take up a lot of our resource budget that we are probably going to want to use when we get to our galaxy and our star system and our atmosphere ray marchers. So yeah, that's kind of the design decision on doing the gas as a particle system rather than an actual like legitimate ray marcher. And I'm pretty satisfied with the effect now. I don't think it looks bad at all. I'm pretty happy with it. It's, it's not perfect, but it looks much better than it did. I'm pretty happy with it. But yeah, so with what we have here, this basically forms the top level of our hierarchy. The next thing I'll be moving on towards after I do a couple cleanup passes on this, get everything crystallized and in a really good shape. The next thing I would be doing is moving on to the galaxy layer, which is what would happen when you approach these close enough to trigger the spawn box. I guess I need to figure out the like multi-tier scanning to scan at different distances for different scale of objects. Um, so I'll probably look at that along with cleaning up the universe layer, which is what I've been working on the past couple days. And then I will move on to the galaxy generator, which I expect will be a lot of fun because we're going to go take our spiral noise function that we used to generate point clouds in the past, and we're going to convert that into a fast noise node to make a spiral galaxy noise type noise node. And yeah, I'm looking forward to that. I think that's going to be a fun implementation. And with this module, we've basically already accomplished all the hardest parts of the refactor for the other layers, which is landing on a paradigm for generation, um, coming up with like a good way to do it that looks good and is performant and can scale. to very large scales. Everything from this point forward, I think, is actually going to be a substantially simpler implementation than what this was. This is the most complex of our layers, and it's also the topmost layer, so it's responsible for like basically being the space level, um, and managing the spawn handoff to galaxies underneath it, which in turn will hand off spawn to star systems, which in turn will probably hand off spawn to planets. And then you'll be able to kind of go into a galaxy and walk around on a planet in that galaxy, and then leave the galaxy and go to another planet in a different galaxy and walk around on it, and there'll be no load screens, just completely seamless gameplay all the way. So yeah, this is what I've been working on past week or so. I quite like it. I feel like it's getting to like a near finished state. Still a lot of polishing. It's maybe 2,000 lines of code all in all. But yeah, it's a demo. Just thought I'd demo this, show where I'm at, the progress on the project over the past week or so. And yeah, that's it. Later.